What happens when a billionaire insults a waitress in a language he thinks she can't understand only for her to answer back fluently? You ever notice how a single comment, one tiny sentence, can flip the energy of an entire room? That's exactly what happened. One warm Thursday afternoon inside a high-end restaurant in Scottsdale, Arizona. The place was polished from floor to ceiling. Marble counters, polished wood tables, quiet background music meant to calm nerves, but still remind you that you're somewhere expensive. Waiters and waitresses moved like clockwork, balancing trays with the kind of skill that only comes after months of working double shifts. That's where Danielle Rhodes comes in. She wasn't the kind of waitress who disappeared into the background. She carried herself with quiet confidence, her dark hair pulled back neatly, her notepad always ready, her smile polite but never forced. People who came in regularly knew her by name. She didn't just drop food on tables. She noticed people, remembered their orders, asked about their families. But that day, the man sitting at the corner table by the window wasn't the type who cared about that. His name was Fared Al-Mansouri, a billionaire businessman from Dubai in town for a series of meetings. He was dressed in a tailored suit that looked like it cost more than the restaurant's monthly rent. His watch, heavy in gold, flashed every time he moved his wrist. He had an aura about him that said, "I get what I want when I want it." When Danielle walked over to greet him, the air already shifted. "Good afternoon, sir." "Welcome. Can I start you off with a drink?" "Nasir Ahmadinil Nas," she asked, pen in hand, voice steady and professional. Fair didn't look up at first. He flicked his phone screen, eyes glued to whatever was more important than the person in front of him. A couple seconds passed before he finally glanced up, gave her a quick scan, and muttered, "Water with lemon." Nothing else. "Naked and Nixon for these." No thank you, no smile, just clipped words delivered like a command. Danielle gave the kind of practice nod that wait staff learned to survive days like this. Of course, I'll bring that right out. She turned away, but at that very moment, Fared's lips curved into something between a smirk and a sneer. He leaned toward the man sitting across from him, a younger associate clearly eager to impress. And then in Arabic, Fared muttered a few words. The tone said everything. Even if you didn't understand the language, you'd catch the meaning. It wasn't a compliment. It wasn't harmless small talk. It was the kind of remark people make when they assume no one around them will understand. Danielle returned with the glass of water, setting it carefully on the table. She didn't break her smile, but her eyes caught just a flicker of his expression. She had heard enough Arabic over the years to recognize the rhythm, the sharpness, the insult hidden behind the language. And that's when the tension began to grow. Quietly, like a storm far off but slowly moving closer, Fair didn't notice. He was too busy scrolling his phone, tossing another comment in Arabic toward his associate. A small laugh followed, careless, dismissive. He thought he was in control of the room, the smartest man at the table. But the thing about arrogance is it often blinds you to the truth staring right back at you. Because Danielle Rhodes wasn't just a waitress. She had a story of her own. One that would soon turn that entire restaurant silent. But before we get to that moment, let's sit at this table a little longer and watch how the smallest exchange starts to shift the ground beneath everyone. Danielle didn't flinch. Years of working in restaurants had trained her not to. You deal with customers who treat you like furniture, others who treat you like their personal therapist, and then people like this, people who wear money like armor and assume the world bends around them. She scribbled his order on her pad, even though she already remembered it. A simple glass of water with lemon barked out like a demand. She wasn't surprised, but what got under her skin wasn't the order. It was the tone. It was the way he spoke in Arabic. His voice dropping low, the smug curl of his lip as he looked her up and down like she was nothing. Sir, would you like to hear today's specials? Napiergar Didi and Neat Stop Me and Sour. Danielle asked, her voice calm. Ferd barely looked up. I said water. Do you need me to repeat myself? Natomai Sandin, Nakaserbi. His accent was heavy, his words clipped, each one like a small slap in the face. The associate across from him, a younger man in a navy blazer, shifted uncomfortably. He clearly wasn't sure whether to laugh, agree, or stay silent. He ended up choosing silence, eyes fixed on the fork in front of him. Danielle didn't press. She had learned not to. She simply nodded and walked back toward the bar, where a couple of other waiters had started to notice the interaction. One of them, a tall guy named Brandon, raised an eyebrow. Everything good over there? He asked, keeping his voice low. Danielle gave a little shrug. Same as usual. Some people don't see you, just the tray in your hand. But as she turned back toward Ferd's table, she caught him watching her, not with interest, not with kindness. It was the look of someone evaluating an object. And then once again, he leaned toward his associate and said something sharp in Arabic. This time, there was no mistaking it. The insult was clear. He was talking about her appearance, her posture, the way she spoke. Danielle's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Not yet. She approached the table again. Have you had a chance to look over the menu? She asked, directing the question to both men. Ferd set his phone down for the first time and locked eyes with her. There was a challenge there. Bring me the lamb and make sure it's not overcooked. I don't trust kitchens in this country. Danielle wrote it down without a word. She turned to the associate who finally spoke, his voice polite, almost apologetic. I'll have the salmon, please. Thank you. Of course, Danielle said, her smile returning for him. Would you like rice or vegetables on the side? Vegetables, please, he replied, relief in his tone that someone had acknowledged him like a human being. She left the table, but Fared's laughter followed her again in Arabic. A quick insult tossed like a dart, and again Danielle caught it. The thing is, Fared didn't know her story. He didn't know that Danielle had spent years living in Morocco with her grandmother after her parents' divorce. He didn't know that Arabic wasn't just a language she studied, but a language tied to her childhood, her family, and her sense of identity. He didn't know that she could understand every single word he was saying. Danielle carried the order slip to the kitchen, handed it over, and leaned on the counter for a moment. Her heart wasn't racing. She'd learned to control that. But inside, something stirred. Something told her this wasn't just another rude customer. This was someone about to learn a lesson he never saw coming. She took a deep breath, adjusted her apron, and walked back out into the dining area. But the real moment was still waiting. The moment when words meant to belittle her would suddenly lose their power, turning the entire room on its head. The restaurant wasn't loud, but it wasn't silent either. The low hum of conversation filled the air as plates clattered softly in the kitchen and glasses clinked at nearby tables. People were talking business, families were eating lunch, and a couple by the window were leaning close in hushed conversation. Nobody was paying much attention to Fared, at least not yet. Danielle returned with a basket of bread and a small plate of butter, the kind of courtesy the restaurant always extended. She set it down gently, keeping her smile professional. Here's some bread while you wait for your meal, she said. Fared didn't respond. He looked at the basket like it was beneath him. Then turning to his associate, he muttered something sharp in Arabic, his voice carrying just enough for Danielle to catch it. Cheap, just like the one serving it. Danielle froze for a fraction of a second, her hand still on the edge of the table. Her face gave away nothing, but inside the words landed like a slap. She had heard worse before. Oh, plenty worse. But this was different. It wasn't just about the bread. It was about her. The associate's eyes flicked nervously toward Danielle. He clearly understood what had been said too, but he said nothing. His silence spoke volumes. He was too intimidated to correct his his boss, too eager to keep his position safe. Danielle pulled her hand back, straightened, and gave a calm nod. "Enjoy," she said softly, turning away. But Farid wasn't finished. Not yet. He leaned back in his chair, loosening his tie slightly, and spoke again in Arabic, this time louder. "Look at the way she walks, like she owns the place, a waitress with attitude. She thinks she's important because she brings plates to tables." The words cut through the air like glass shattering. A couple sitting nearby tilted their heads, confused. They didn't understand the language, but they could read tone, arrogance, mockery. It was obvious even without translation. Danielle stopped halfway across the floor, her back to Farid, her eyes fixed on the bar. She gripped her notepad tighter. She wasn't just hearing words. She was hearing years of dismissal, years of people assuming she didn't belong, years of being underestimated. She closed her eyes briefly, studying herself. When she turned back, her expression hadn't changed. Still calm, still collected, but her mind was already preparing for the moment she would respond. Back at Farid's table, the associate shifted uncomfortably again. "Maybe we should keep it down," he whispered. Farid smirked. "Why?" "She doesn't understand a word. Something der Arkennasterend." He gestured toward Danielle with a flick of his wrist like he was waving off an insect. People like her never do. It was the kind of line that if spoken in English would have drawn immediate glares, but in Arabic, Farid thought he was safe. He wasn't. Danielle approached the table again to refill his water. She set the pitcher down, lifted his glass, and began pouring slowly. Her eyes met his, steady, unblinking. Farid leaned forward, lips curling. And then, in Arabic, he said the one thing that would change everything. "She should be grateful we even let her work here. A woman like that belongs in the kitchen, not standing in front of me." The words weren't just rude. They were degrading, stripped of all basic respect. The associate dropped his gaze, embarrassed. A man at the next table glanced up, sensing tension. The restaurant seemed to quiet just a little, as if waiting. Danielle set the glass down gently. No slam, no harsh gesture, just quiet, controlled precision. She took one step back from the table, her eyes never leaving for Reed's. She had heard enough. But what happened next wasn't anger, and it wasn't yelling. It was something far more powerful, something that would silence the entire room in seconds. The glass sat between them, condensation sliding down its side. Farid smirked, confident, leaning back in his chair as though he had just scored a private victory. He picked up his phone again, tapping away, dismissing her as if she were invisible. Danielle took a quiet breath. Her voice came low at first, almost gentle but imperfect, fluid Arabic. "Would you like more bread, sir, or are the insults filling enough for you?" The words cut clean through the space between them, crisp, precise, not a single syllable off. Farid's phone slipped in his hand, nearly clattering onto the table. His head snapped up, eyes wide, his confident mask cracking. For the first time since she approached, he looked unsettled. His associate's jaw dropped. The man stammered, switching from English to Arabic, then back again as though he wasn't sure what language fit the moment. You speak Arabic?" Danielle's gaze stayed fixed on Farid. "Fluently," she replied, still in Arabic. Her tone wasn't raised, but it carried. People at nearby tables, though they didn't understand the words, could feel the shift in the air. Forks paused mid-bite. A whisper of silence spread. Farid blinked, trying to regain his footing. He forced a laugh, sharp and brittle. "Oh, so you picked up a few words from a phrase book. Cute." Danielle didn't flinch. "No, I picked it up from my grandmother who raised me in Casablanca. Every word you've spoken since I came to this table." I understood. The associate sat back, his hand covering his mouth, half in shock, half in embarrassment. The couple at the next table, sensing something big, exchanged looks. They didn't know Arabic, but they didn't need translation. They could read faces, tones, the energy snapping through the room. Farid's lips parted, then closed again. His tongue darted over them as if searching for a comeback, something sharp to throw back at her. Nothing came. Danielle leaned just slightly closer, her voice calm, unshaken. You assumed I was beneath you, that my uniform meant you could say anything without consequence. But let me tell you, respect is not optional. Not here, not anywhere. Her words hung heavy in the air. Even those who didn't understand the language were watching, drawn in by the raw shift in power. Farid sat stiff, his hand gripping the edge of the table. He glanced around, realizing now that people were staring. His arrogance had been a shield before, but now it was turning into a spotlight. The silence stretched. Then from somewhere in the back of the restaurant, a fork clinked onto a plate. Someone whispered, "Nater onden natindenien." The moment was alive, fragile, everyone waiting to see what he would say. Farid tried again, his tone softer, the edge of command slipping. You misunderstood me." Danielle raised an eyebrow, switching back to English so everyone could hear. "No, I didn't." Gasps rippled through the nearest tables. Now the whole room understood. Farid shifted in his seat, his polished confidence unraveling thread by thread. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not like this. Danielle didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The truth sat there plain and undeniable. For once, it wasn't the billionaire in control. It was the waitress with the notepad in her hand and the language of his heart on her tongue. But power has a way of making people desperate. And Farid wasn't about to back down without trying to claw some of it back. Farid straightened in his chair, his face a mask of forced composure. But his eyes betrayed him. The cool arrogance was gone, replaced with something closer to unease, maybe even fear. Still, he wasn't the type to accept humiliation quietly. He cleared his throat, voice heavy with a forced calm. "You think because you can speak a language, you're my equal." His Arabic rang sharper now, less playful, more defensive. Danielle didn't blink. "I don't need to think it. I know it." She paused, her words deliberate. "And your language doesn't belong to you. It belongs to anyone willing to respect it, which clearly you don't." The associate shifted again, tugging at his blazer as though wishing he could sink into the floor. "Farid, maybe we should." Farid cut him off with a hand. He leaned forward, lowering his voice, though the venom still dripped. "You're nothing more than a server. Do you really think your little performance changes anything? Money decides power. Always has, always will." Danielle tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but unyielding. "Money may buy you the best seat in the house, but it doesn't buy you respect. That has to be earned." His jaw tightened. He picked up his fork, stabbed a piece of bread, and bit into it hard. His movements were sharp, meant to signal control, but they betrayed his frustration. Nearby, the couple by the window whispered to each other, eyes locked on the scene. Another man at the bar shifted his stool slightly, pretending to look at his phone, but clearly listening. The energy in the room wasn't subtle anymore. Everyone was waiting, watching. Farid slammed the fork down. "Do you know who I am?" Danielle leaned in just a touch, her voice lowering. "Do you know who you are without all this?" She gestured subtly toward his tailored suit, his watch, the glass of water on the table. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. Farid's face hardened, his confidence wobbling. He wasn't used to being questioned like that. Not by business rivals, not by employees, and certainly not by a waitress. His associate finally spoke, voice hushed but urgent. "She's right, Farid. Nakir Asim Insat. People are looking. Let's not." "Silence," Farid snapped, switching back to Arabic, his face flushed, his hand tightening around his glass. "You think this woman deserves respect? She's just playing games." Danielle crossed her arms lightly, her stance relaxed but strong. "Games," she repeated in Arabic, her pronunciation crisp, her words echoing his with confidence. "No, this is life, and every word you've spoken here reveals more about you than it does about me." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the kitchen staff, partially visible through the swinging door, had slowed down, curious about the storm brewing out front. Danielle didn't falter. "Naten setim nenyon sim." She leaned back slightly, letting her presence speak for itself. Her voice softened, but the steel inside it remained. Respect isn't handed down like a paycheck. It's given freely, or not at all. And right now, no amount of money in your bank account can buy back what you've just lost in this room. Ferd looked around, every eye was on him. Some filled with curiosity, others with quiet judgment. His chest rose and fell faster now, his carefully curated calm slipping further away. He forced a laugh, though it came out strained. This is ridiculous. You're making a scene. Danielle shook her head, her voice cutting the air with finality. No, sir. You made the scene the moment you opened your mouth. For a moment, nothing moved. Not a glass, not a fork, not even the air itself. The confrontation was laid bare, impossible to ignore. But the story wasn't just about this clash. It was about the truth behind Danielle's strength. A truth that would soon leave the room not just silent, but moved. For a long moment, the restaurant seemed to hover in suspended silence. Farid leaned back, clutching his glass as if gripping it might anchor him, but his hands betrayed a slight tremor. His associate kept glancing between him and Danielle, as if silently begging for the confrontation to end. Danielle, however, stayed steady. She knew this was the moment to shift the weight of the room, not through anger, but through truth. She let out a slow breath and in Arabic said something that neither man expected. My grandmother used to say, the tongue is a sword. Use it to cut down pride or to lift someone up. And ender diusum in per Nelpin Sauna. She taught me that when I was 10 years old in Casablanca. Gasps rippled softly through the restaurant, even from those who didn't understand Arabic simply because of her tone. Quiet, assured, personal. Ferd frowned, his arrogance faltering. Casablanca. He echoed disbelief, lacing his voice. Danielle nodded, this time speaking in English so the entire room could follow. My father's job took us overseas when I was a child. My parents divorced, and I lived with my grandmother for years. She didn't speak English, so if I wanted to talk to her, if I wanted to really know her, I had to learn Arabic. She became my world. The language wasn't just something I studied, it was something I lived. Every market trip, every story at night, every prayer she whispered. She paused, her eyes steady on Farid. So, when you speak Arabic to insult me, you're not just insulting me. You're spitting on the very thing that shaped who I am. You're spitting on the woman who raised me. The air grew thick with weight. Nobody touched their plates. The servers behind the counter were frozen, their eyes locked on Danielle. Farid shifted uncomfortably in his chair. His voice dropped as though unsure whether to keep fighting or to retreat. I didn't know. Danielle's gaze sharpened. So, that's exactly the problem. You didn't care to know. The associate finally exhaled as though he'd been holding his breath the whole time. He leaned forward, speaking softly to Danielle, his tone respectful in a way Farid's never had been. Your grandmother? She sounds like she was a strong woman. More sober in knees. Danielle softened just slightly at the mention. She was. She taught me that dignity isn't about what you wear or how much money you have. It's about how you treat people who can do nothing for you. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water, sending ripples across every listener in the room. A woman at a nearby table dabbed her eyes with a napkin. The man sitting across from her shook his head slowly, whispering, "Wow, masen bindi besalanan ind." Farid swallowed hard. His bravado was collapsing. His fingers drummed nervously on the table, a habit of a man suddenly unmed. He glanced around, noticing the stares, realizing he was no longer the admired figure at the corner table. He was the spectacle. Danielle didn't gloat. Ding 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 ding. She didn't sneer. Her voice remained calm, her posture steady.